Welcome to the Sencast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the host of the Sencast and the managing director of B Squared. We started this podcast 4 years ago as a way to help improve knowledge around SEND. Yes, there is lots of stuff you can go and read, but we were all very busy and I do not have the time to read a book. Everyone working in schools needs training and support around SEND, but the funding isn't there to achieve this. This podcast helps solve that problem, and it is a great way to get the same consistent message to schools and parents. In this episode, we're discussing assumptions around physical disabilities. And this week, my guest is Chloe Plummer from Move Europe. And Move Europe works with special schools across the UK, enabling children with physical disabilities and complex needs to gain independent movement skills. Chloe is the event and programs coordinator South and has her own lived experience of physical disability. The Sencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. I normally mention our assessment software on this podcast that everyone knows us for, but this time I'm going to talk about Eversense, our evidence and communication system for parents. Eversense feels like social media, so it's extremely easy to understand and use, but it is also extremely secure. It's a safe place to share evidence of learning with parents or external professionals. It is also a great way to capture pupil voice or use as your homeschool diary or reading diary. Visit the B Square website to find out more about Eversense or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through Eversense. Now, let's get on with the podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing assumptions around physical disabilities. My guest this week is Chloe Plummer, who works for Move Europe and is a trustee for the Accessful Foundation and Move Momentum charity. And Chloe combines her own personal experiences to support and champion individuals with physical disabilities. Welcome to the show, Chloe.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. So we decided to record this podcast about 23 minutes ago, after recording our last episode, after we briefly discussed people's attitudes towards physical disabilities. You are physically disabled, so shall we start with what your disabilities are?
Yeah, that's right. So I have cerebral palsy, quite a common physical disability. And for me, cerebral palsy for many different people kind of presents itself in lots of different ways. But for me, it mainly affects the use of the lower half of my body, so mainly my legs. So I use a walking frame to help me get around.
Cool. So I don't know much about cerebral palsy, so let's start with what's cerebral palsy.
Yeah, so cerebral palsy is as I say, very common physical disability, childhood disability. So if you've got cerebral palsy, you'll have it from before birth, during birth, or just after. And I think it's probably the most common childhood kind of physical disability, but essentially occurs when there's been a brain injury in those kind of throughout birth or just before birth or just after. And that kind of brain injury then results in cerebral palsy, which, as I say, kind of manifests itself in lots of different ways for different people. So kind of some people like me can perhaps just be affected on their kind of lower body. Some people can be affected in all four limbs. Some people can be affected in just one limb. Some people can have a kind of other disabilities on top of that, kind of related to kind of speech. Can often be people with cerebral palsy can also sometimes have autism and other disabilities as well. But yeah, no two people with cerebral palsy are the same. So you could ask me that question and you get one response. You could ask the next person and you'd get another response as well. There's lots of different types as well. But yeah, I think that's a quick summary, I think.
I've learned, don't assume. It's like, I don't know much. Let's get it from someone who may know more than me. So you arrived at the office today and I knew you had a physical disability before you came.
Yeah.
And I was quite confident because we were in a lovely office. We're on the ground floor.
Yeah.
Life was going to be, there shouldn't be any issues at all.
Mm-hmm.
But when you arrived, I held the doors open and things like that. And I kind of sit there and going, am I doing more than I would normally? And I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I said, again, it's from lack of knowledge and experience. I think lots of people probably have the same thing.
Yeah, I think, as we said when we come up with the idea just to record this podcast. I think people sometimes, and it always comes from a good place. I speak about this a lot in different forms, but it always comes from a good place. But I think people see someone with a visible disability and almost panic, and they're not really quite sure what to do, unless they've obviously had experience of that themselves or someone close to them, which is not going to be the case for everyone in the world. So yeah, I think sometimes people panic, and although it comes from a good place, they perhaps overthink it and then perhaps start doing things that you just wouldn't normally do. Because if you, for a minute, take the person with the disability out of the situation and just replace him with Joe Bloggs, what you've actually done is really bizarre. And, so yeah, I think it comes from a good place, but it comes from a place of perhaps a lack of confidence, sometimes understanding as well. And just, I think as well, that coming from that good place, people not wanting to say something wrong or do something wrong. So instead, and we all do it in other areas of life, you kind of overcompensate, don't you, to kind of get around that. But yeah, that's where I think it comes from.
And that's the thing is, it's the more I've learned about so many different things, the more I sit there and go, actually, I realize in that situation, I would be a bit panicky. I wouldn't know what to do. And then it literally, as you said, if you switch that person out, you'd watch me looking like a rabbit in a headlights, just going, I don't know what to do with this person. It's like, it's just a person. Why are you being weird? Why are you being different? It's just another person. And I think when we think of complex needs, we kind of do the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of just sit there, and when you arrived, I'm like, I'm going to open the door, but I'm not going to do anything else. So I'm pretty sure if she needs something, she'll tell me quite on her own, I need this, or can you do this, or the chair you're sitting in, that won't work for me.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to change the chair before you arrive in case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that perhaps people without a disability, or at least without a kind of experience with it in their lives. I know lots of people, people around me in my network, they have experience of disability, and so perhaps don't have those situations now. That's not to say they ever didn't. But yeah, I think, it just comes from that experience, and making those assumptions, because disabled people will, I'm very blessed to know lots of disabled people. They are some of the best problem solvers I know, but also some of the best communicators. And if something's not right, they will tell you. But if something can't be done in that instance to make it right, they are also fantastic problem solvers. So again, things like, if you do need to make arrangements, they'll be honest. When I emailed you about these podcast episodes, I did tell you I had a physical disability, so I could make sure I could come and do this podcast, enjoy the experience, and not have to worry about everything else. So
and it was a case of I literally looked down and went, yep, there's nothing blocking aisles. Because I literally going, I don't know what physical disability, I don't know what's going to turn up. But I don't know, but it was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Chill. There are lots of options. And if you arrive and there's something not right, I'm hoping you won't be offended and you'll tell me, because you've probably experienced this a lot more than I have.
Yeah. I think that's the key as well. As we know from lots of things, in the media all the time, I'm certainly surrounded by, just through my kind of interests and lots of kind of disabled influencers and things I follow. There is, so much in our society that is still inaccessible, unfortunately. I think the difference is there's places where they can hold their hands up and say, okay, this isn't right, let's do something about it, versus places that just kind of ignore it and brush it under the carpet. That's not what you want. So that attitude that you just explained, that, we're going to do what we can, is absolutely where we want to be heading.
It's interesting is I could think back, and I think the first time I saw someone in your walking frame, I was like, what is that? And you're watching them going, oh, and then there is somebody around our area, a youngster who has that, and you going, oh God, he's disabled. Oh my God, look at him. And then you kind of watch the people around him and you're like, it's making no difference to anyone but me.
Yeah. There's a couple within what you said, there's a couple of things that come to my mind. I think that the first one is just seeing people with physical disabilities in everyday life in your community is so important. And I'm often, in a supermarket, in a shop, and a little child, perhaps without a disability, as far as we know, might ask their parents, "Oh, mummy, why is that lady using that?" And what I do like is those parents that are honest and would just say, "Oh, that's helping that lady walk," rather than the parents who grab their child by the scruff of their t-shirt, tell them to be quiet and shuffle them on, because what that then does is that doesn't answer children's amazing curiosity that they have. That'll then leave them with questions if it's not answered, and then they could lead that experience, to being a negative one because they were perhaps told off by mum or dad. Whereas actually those children that get the answer, "Oh, it's just helping that lady walk," they're like, "Okay, cool, can I have these sweets?" They move on,
Yes.
It's really normal, and they probably, wouldn't think about it again that day. And then hopefully, say for example, they go back to school and perhaps a child at their school turns up with one of them, they know exactly what that does.
Yeah.
And they haven't had that negative experience. And then that leads to a lovely path of, someone being really accepting and inclusive of someone with a disability, rather than kind of that fear. Because I think it does come down to fear and the unknown. And we're all humans, we do fear the unknown, what we don't know. So I think it's important to have those open conversations, particularly when, children are so young, because children are key to...
They are. And I think it is when you're saying to that child, you're grabbing their arm, you're saying, "Don't stare,"
Yeah.
and walking away, you're basically going, "Oh, that must be a really horrible person because I'm
Yeah,
not allowed to
yeah,
look
yeah.
at them. That's bad. If I
Yeah.
see that, bad."
Yeah.
Whereas actually the reason the parent may have said that is, "I don't know how to explain this to you."
Yeah.
And I suppose one of the things they could do is, if they're slightly older, is, well, why don't you ask them?
Yeah.
There's loads of ways out.
That's what I really like as well. Why didn't you ask them? Go and say hello. And then that kind of, just removes that barrier that it's a bad thing, because that person's just talked to me just like that, the next person in the shop,
And I know I've been a person where I've seen someone in a wheelchair and a walking frame, not in a big supermarket, the smaller ones like the local co-op, where it's one person at a time, unless you're quite polite to each other, you can just about squeeze past. I know I've seen someone in a chair and I've gone, "Oh, I'll go to another aisle and come back." Mainly because I kind of like don't want to sit there and be in their way. But I was like, hang on, I'm now avoiding them.
Yeah.
Or it might have seemed like I looked at them and walked away. Well, that wasn't very nice. And it's interesting why you're doing something and the reason, how it can be really different. So I've now learned to, no, I'm just going to walk up there and get my thing as if they're another person. Because guess what?
Because we all get in everyone's way, that's how it works. Yeah.
And it's really interesting. It's like when you're young, and often at places the disabled toilet is the baby change.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in the baby change, and a disabled person knocks on the door, and you're like, "Oh my God, it's a disabled person." I know we both have equal rights to this toilet, and they can generally wait too often. Now, there are probably people who cannot wait. There are reasons and things like that, but you sit there and various things in my life made me, I'm not saying it's fear and be scared. It sounds really horrible, but it's kind of like, I don't know how to act. I don't know what I should be doing. And I've got slowly unpicking that. But also I don't know where it's come from.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I obviously come from a different perspective because I've had that physical disability all my life. I've never known anything different, and I never will, and I never want to. I think that's the most important thing as well. But because it really has shaped such a fantastic path that I'm now on and love. But yeah, I think maybe it just comes from life experiences. I think that you probably don't think about it at the time, but then when they kind of come together, it creates something a bit more. But I think it's just around kind of really kind of smashing those assumptions, really, and that fear out the park of it's nothing to be fearful of, and don't assume, because and I think especially in nowadays when so much more is spoken about kind of mental health, which I know is slightly different from physical disability, but there's a lot of things out there around kind of not assuming, because you don't know someone's story, you don't know what someone's going through at home or whatever. And I think the same can be applied. Don't assume. You don't, just because, don't judge a book by its cover is essentially it. You don't know until you go and speak to that person and find out more, because chances are your assumptions are probably not going to be on the mark. So
And I don't think we can really have this conversation without bringing in Channel 4's Last Leg.
I love that program.
And I love that program for so many ways. Before I even get onto the content of the show, it was designed to only be run while the Paralympics, I can't remember which one it was, might have been 2012 Paralympics were on. It was supposed to be run for 2 weeks, however long, and then end. And it was such a hit.
Yeah.
It continued and stayed and is still on 12 years later.
Yeah.
And it is phenomenal. And I remember watching those early shows, and there was a section on there of questions you want to ask but don't know how to ask them or where to ask them. And it was really interesting. One of them, as I said earlier, was if I'm have a photo taken with a dwarf swimmer or athlete, do I bend down or is it rude? Their response was, well, unless you want a photo taken of your knees, I'd probably bend down. And it's that sort of thing when you're sitting going, should I or shouldn't I? And it's like, well, what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
And the other one, which I said earlier, is if there's someone in a wheelchair in a bar, are you able to pass a pint over them? Or do they own that vertical space? And you're literally going, and all these questions came, and they were always from a good place, but didn't know what they should do.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said to you when we were just setting up for this podcast, I speak about this a lot, and I've kind of got experience of delivering kind of disability awareness training in various settings. And I actually did a bit of a informal session for my lovely team last week, just around like language and how we talk about disability in our work at Move. And I had a question at the end of kind of like, how do you know what's right and what's wrong? And the best example I can give is just when you do encounter that disabled person, whether it's those examples you gave, just ask them, is it all right for me to do this? What's the best way for me to help you? Because that person will be able to tell you. You don't need to get weird about it. Just say, is it, oh sorry mate, I've got a pint here, am I all right just to lean over and pass it over to you? That's all you've got to do. Or like taking a photo with someone, perhaps they're a wheelchair user or whatever, ask them, how's the best way for me to position this camera? That's all you've got to do. We're just humans, just with a visible physical disability.
And it's just, I don't know if I should. Do I draw attention to it? Do I pretend it doesn't exist? What is? And in reality, it's kind of pretending it doesn't exist, because otherwise I'm differentiating you.
Yeah, I think that pretending it doesn't exist is a very interesting one, and I could go much more into it. I think for me, and again, I touched upon this when I do the kind of sessions, is when people say, oh, I don't see you as disabled, I know it comes from a well place, and they're seeing, Chloe and my personality and what have you before my frame that's right here. But actually, when you say to someone, I don't see you as disabled, you're almost ignoring the barriers that they can face as a disabled person, because you're ignoring that. So I think it's really interesting to kind of phrasing around that. It comes from a good place, but again, I think it comes from that awkwardness and that overcompensating. They don't really know what to say, so they want to kind of almost go one up and say something that they think is going to kind of quite woo you, but actually it's okay. Like this, my key message throughout everything I do is disabled is not a bad word. Don't be afraid to say it. It's not a bad word at all. And yeah, I'll do whatever I can to make people feel comfortable that it's not a bad word, that it's okay to say.
Because before we started recording, I offered you lunch, and there's a cafe on site, so we can go there and get a baguette or get something. And generally, when you go there, it will be on a plate and a tray. Mm-hmm. And I would literally look at you and go, do you want me to carry that for you?
Exactly, yeah.
In the same way as if your hands were full of bags.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the sort of thing, it's look at, probably don't go, cerebral palsy needs this support.
Yeah.
It's more like, well, her hands are full, if that's the correct polite way of saying your hands are full.
Yeah, you're busy, you're engaged.
Your hands are obviously busy, and I don't know. But then, first question, if you are somewhere, you're going to McDonald's, you order your meal, and it comes out on a tray, and you have your frame, what happens in those situations? This is my chance to ask these questions.
Yeah, in those situations, like when I know that perhaps something's going to come out, I'm not going to be able to carry, when I'm making that order, I would just say to the person, do you mind bringing it over to the table? Or I know I'm eating in, but can I have it in a bag instead? You know, there's things that I know as a disabled person will help me. So I just make sure that I communicate it to that person. And don't get me wrong, like I'm I'm getting a bit too close to 30 now, so it's a learning thing. But for
You youngster.
me over the years, I haven't always been very good at saying this is what I need. But certainly as my career now has developed into what it is, and I do so much on my own and lead a very independent life, I've got much better at saying this is what I need. But yeah, it's definitely not something that's come naturally, but I think as it now is starting to come more naturally, I'm able to answer those questions much more comfortably.
So is that comes from a place of maybe throughout your life, everyone maybe overcompensated so you weren't as independent?
I definitely think I have the most amazing family, and I hope they will listen to this podcast when it comes out. But yeah, I think, I have an incredibly caring family and friends who want the best for me. But I think definitely when I was younger, like my parents were nervous about sending me off to school and things like that. So I think, yeah, it's definitely developed as I've got older and I've got that independence, and I've been able to advocate for myself that that's what I want. Like my mum always says, I know exactly what I want and nothing will stop me getting it. And she's absolutely right. But it's yeah, it does come with time. And I think acceptance as well. Again, I spoke to my team about it last week. Now, I'm 29 years old. I'm incredibly proud of my disabled identity, but it wasn't always the case. Like Chloe, 10, 11 years ago, I was about to head off to university. I wasn't so proud about it. If anything, I was scared because I was scared that it was going to be a barrier to making friends. And I remember saying to my dad, he popped around the night before I left for university and gave me the classic student staples of some pot noodles and some baked beans, I think. And I said, Dad, what if no one wants to be friends with me because of my frame? And I just reflect on that now, especially this time of year of like A-level results and university stuff, in the news. I think I should never have thought that because that just wasn't the case. I made some fantastic friends who I still have, all of them now, and they just completely accepted me for exactly who I am. But there's definitely, times in my life where I wasn't as accepting of it and I was almost fearful of it, just like those other examples we spoke about.
And I think I'm hoping, you are still very young, that I'm hoping that things like The Last Leg have just really raised, I think that's been a real game changer in disability on TV and awareness of it. And I mean, but it's Adam Hill, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember him doing a stand-up show with sign language interpreters.
Yeah.
And then him literally going through like, oh, have you got any kind of deaf people in the audience? And they'd wait and then they'd put their hands up. And it literally would introduce us all to how do you clap when you're deaf? Because and it's you put your hands up and and all of these things.
Like a wave.
Yeah. And I learned so much about sign language just because he was doing a stand-up show there and he included them.
Yeah. I think the media, and I think Channel 4 in particular, particularly leading with The Last Leg, have been fantastic in things like that. Particularly, I think really from London 2012 when we had such a big thing like the Paralympics in our own country. But I think, in those years and those kind of years I spoke about since I've been at university and stuff, you see a lot more disabled people in popular forms on telly, influencers on social media, that kind of thing. And I think, that does go a long way to kind of changing attitudes. But there is always the flip side that it does come with those negative attitudes as well. But I think that's just the society that we live in, unfortunately. But I think, I like to focus on the positive that it's making. I think for me, in the last kind of, 10, 12 years, probably since that London 2012, I've seen a lot more people like me on TV and things and in social media. And when I was younger, I didn't. And I think that makes a big difference.
I was just literally thinking, it's one of the questions you can never answer. But if you were going off to university this year as that 18-year-old, you probably would feel different about that making friends.
Yeah. Now, if I could go back like 10, 11 years and give myself any advice, it'd be don't have that worry, because you don't need it. Like, the right people will, the right friends will completely accept that. And yeah, that was exactly the case for me. And I know many others as well. But I think it does come from, when you drill really deeper down into it, it comes from those attitudes and assumptions in society that disability is a bad thing and it's something that you don't want to be associated with, which is why it's essentially ableism, internalized ableism that told me that would people not want to be my friend because I had a disability, but couldn't be more further from the truth.
I like, there are people on like YouTube and whatever shorts I watch, and it's people sharing their experiences. And there's a couple of people who do Tourette's. And
yes.
There is, I think, a Tourette's podcast, and some of their clips, I can't stop laughing for a while. There's also a student who is at uni in America who records her during lectures, and she's with her friends. And her friends are just completely oblivious, and she's ticking off and she says things, it's fine. And sometimes she has these physical tics, and some of them, I think she moves her head quite away, and you'll see her friend just put their hands up.
Yeah.
Just to look, and you're like going, not at all fazed by this.
No, that's another thing I say as well, is that if you ever want to know how to, behave, act around someone with a disability, just look at who they're with, their friends and their family, and they'll tell you everything you need to know. They really will. And I think that's a fantastic example of that. I've got friends who are amazing, who will, take my frame and sling it in the back of the car like it's another shopping bag. It's nothing to them. It's normal to my brothers as well. We're out as a family. We get up to go and they bring that back to me like it's the most normal thing in the world. Someone else completely kind of
But I bet
panicked.
They're horrible about it as well. In the right moment, in the right way, just be clear, in the right way, I bet you.
It depends who's paid for their beers, I guess. But yeah, no, they are, my whole family and friends are very, very accepting. But I do just think generally see how people around people with disabilities are interacting, and that will tell you everything you need to.
But you mentioned beers there. Obviously, as a disabled person with a walking frame, you can definitely not do any drinking, any clubbing, anything, can you? That
honestly,
would not be allowed.
The stories, especially from my uni days, that come from that is bizarre. Like people, when not so much now because I'm getting a bit older, but when I was in those younger days, like people were like baffled that I was in a club, but I was 18 and I had loads of new friends. Of course, I was going to go and have a good time, and I had people telling me that I was like brave and things for being in a club, but why am I it's not a brave thing. To me, being brave is doing something. I've also skydived, for example. If someone said to me, "You're so brave," is that brave because I've skydived or because I'm in a club? To me, being in a club is something quite normal for an 18, 19-year-old. Why am I brave?
So, questions about skydiving.
Would you say that to someone without a disability? Would you say that to my friend?
If you're skydiving, yes, I would.
Well, yeah.
But question about skydiving then.
Yeah.
So obviously you didn't take your frame into the plane.
No.
Because you're not really walking in the plane.
No, but no walking involved.
Did you land where the plane took off? So was your frame there?
No. So skydive with a great company who do skydives for first-time skydivers and also people with disabilities as well. They skydive with kind of 90-year-old veterans and people who've got spinal cord injuries and all sorts. And no, so everyone, when you land in a completely separate place, and everyone gets in like a buggy to go back to the main bit. They just put the frame in the back of the buggy and got it to me. But yeah, I think that was again another fantastic example of how for that company disability was like completely normal. They weren't fazed by it. The only very, very subtle thing they did was there was someone in the flight before me with a disability as well. They just gave us a little green wristband, which just basically meant that your instructor was like the top instructor, so that you were super, super looked after. Because obviously, skydiving it's not your everyday activity, is it? And there are some things you've got to consider. But yeah, so like unfazed by it and just normal. It was a really, really positive experience.
The thing is, when I think about, so my mum worked in a special school, so I used to see the kids, and I knew they got the transport to and from home to school. And that's the thing, is probably in my head as a child, because I didn't see them out and about,
Mm-hmm.
that they kind of just stayed at home if they're not at school.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that kind of, when you're at uni, you're probably just sitting in your halls waiting for Monday morning to go
Nope.
back to uni.
No.
And it's because of you only know what you see.
Yeah. Yeah.
But of course you're going to go clubbing.
Yeah.
Of course you're probably going to lose your frame.
Yeah. Nearly. Yeah. Yeah.
But you can do exactly the same as we all do.
Yeah.
And in some ways, there's probably no difference.
Nice.
And then the next thing, there's probably a big difference.
I always say to people, I need a super happy and exciting life, but I always have a really normal life. I have to go to the shop later to get some stuff for dinner. The amount of times I've picked something up for dinner and someone said to me, "Oh, well done, you getting some food for mum." I'm like, no, it's for me. I need to eat as well, you know? I do all the normal things. I go to work throughout the week. I have to go and get things in the shop. I have to fill up my car with petrol. I drive, so I have to fill it up with petrol. Otherwise, I'm never going to go anywhere.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done, you.
It's exactly like that. And it's like, would you tell the next person in that petrol queue, well done for filling up their petrol tank? Probably not. So, and I know it comes from a really good place, but I think sometimes when you do say well done to someone with a disability for those very normal everyday activities, it can take away from things that they really do deserve a well done from. And yeah, yes, I would say for me it's a bit of an ick when people do that. Like, yeah.
It's interesting. There was a video that was on YouTube. I think it was someone with autism or something, but they basically been involved in the college basketball team, but never played. And the last game, they allowed them to come on for the last quarter.
I know what you mean, yeah.
And they scored. And the whole arena went mental. And the person showed it, and you're going, that's amazing. And the person paused it and went, I hate that clip.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
he wasn't allowed to play, and then they gave him this thing, and then the whole, it's like, you're saying, what is the message you're giving here? You're saying he can't, but we're going to give you a special opportunity.
Yeah.
And it is really interesting.
The message is that you're saying that they can't, we're going to give you this opportunity, but that opportunity is tokenistic, and we are like the heroes for providing you with that opportunity. But actually, that's an opportunity we should have provided you with anyway. Yeah, we're making it out to be some special thing, but actually, it's something that should be given to anyone.
And that's the thing. You don't get in the, should we, shouldn't we? Oh, that's a whole thing. But interesting, one of the things which we discussed before, and you just reminded me there, is when you got that food, you go, you're getting it from mum, is that the assumptions people make about the person with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had more than one opportunity, and I know there'll be people listening to this who will laugh at this, but I'm with someone and they're my friends and they think that they are my mum or a family member when actually they are. I mean, one time it happened with my best friend. We were going through, we went to Wembley Arena for a concert. That's something we really like to do, go to a lot of. She went through the scanners first, and then the person said, "Oh, do you want to tell your daughter to come through?" She went, "My daughter, that's my best friend, and she's older than me." We were like, how does this make sense? How? Like, and you could tell that anyone else, you could tell that we were very clearly friends. Yeah, I think the security person obviously just panicked, didn't know what to do, probably wasn't expecting someone with a physical disability to arrive at their security scanner that day. And people quite often assume that you shouldn't be alone or doing things independently.
And if the person's with you, they're probably a carer.
Yeah, they can't just be your friend, or it can't be a friend, or not that I am at the moment, but couldn't ever be like a boyfriend or anything like a partner, anything like that. I follow a lot of disabled influencers on social media who are hugely successful and are in relationships and have been for a number of years, and their partner is often mistaken for a carer or a family member when actually that's their husband or wife. They've got a very clear wedding ring on their finger, Yeah, it is interesting.
And just touching on that when you went to that arena and your friend went through, they didn't speak to you, they spoke to them. So do you find that when they see a disability, a physical disability, they then assume that you cannot communicate, you cannot, you have all of those?
Yeah.
issues. What I'm saying sounds really horrible there,
Yeah.
those issues. But did other maybe physical, more mental disabilities as well?
Yeah.
They literally go, oh, that's someone who just cannot do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does happen less now, because I think I've got to a place in my life where, yeah, I do have a lot of independence, and I'm not always with someone as I would have been, when I was much younger. But yeah, it does happen. And I think, yeah, people just, like I say, they judge a book by its cover and don't actually think, yeah. I think in my work with Move, we work with children with a lot of like complex needs, and I think that often happens, like children with quite significant complex needs. Yeah, that assumption can be made, but actually if you give them the right tools to communicate and take the time that they need to communicate and understand with them, like they can be some of the most kind of, yeah, thoughtful, communicative people you'll ever meet. It's just about giving that person the time to do that, and yeah, not kind of jumping in before them, before they've had the chance to communicate. And yeah, it does happen.
So we've talked a lot about you as an adult.
Yeah.
And drinking and various other stuff and going to arenas and stuff. What about you as a child? So how was school for you?
Yeah, I loved school. I had a fantastic experience with school. I was very lucky to go to two schools that were very kind of forward thinking in terms of, well, all their students really, but definitely in terms of disability. But in both my primary and my secondary school, I was the only child with a physical disability. So yeah, that was, yeah, interesting for me and them, I think. Again, I think this is why I love school so much. I wasn't ever made to feel different, but actually through my conversations now in my kind of career and with other disabled people I've met along the way, I think my experience was really quite unique. Like, for example, with PE, I know a lot of my disabled friends who went to other schools, they weren't even given the option to take part in PE. They were just told you're going to go to the library for that hour. But I specifically remember when I went to my secondary school, they, as part of my kind of transition, they said, what do you want to do when it comes to PE? Do you want to do PE or do you want to go somewhere else? I said, no, I want to do PE with my friends. So I did PE, but I'm very conscious that I think I had really quite a privileged experience of that, and that's not the case for everyone, which is why I'm passionate about doing what I do now, both in my career, but also things on the side like this, to kind of speak up for those things that do happen for people that might not have been as comfortable as having those conversations as I was, or even given the opportunity to have that.
I think all the stuff we're kind of covering it's, as you said before, I'm going to come back to it again. It's asking that person in front of you what they need, or and that's the thing. In certain situations, we're going, "Oh, I'll be sure to do that," but going, "I'll probably situation going, I don't know what to do." But what I've learned, and again, I'm really lucky that I've had kind of lots of experiences. My brother-in-law sounds wrong. My brother-in-law had a stroke sort of 18 years ago, and for a while he was in a wheelchair. He doesn't have much use of, I think it's the left side of his body. So you make adaptions. You make sure that the coffee table is always on the right, because that's the one where he can get his cup of tea. And part of it is just watching, but part of it is either asking him or asking his wife what's needed and learning. And it's just, if he's going to go towards a step, just be in front of him type thing. But it's a few little things. But apart from that, he does his own thing.
Yeah, that's another thing as well. I think with people with physical disabilities, and I think it's actually more kind of a topic to discuss, I guess, when you think about things like bigger things like work. I think when some employers, I do think it's heading in the right direction. I still think there's some work to do, but I think employers can see an interviewee with a physical disability and think, oh my goodness, there's so much stuff we going to need to put in place to support them. But I've been an employee for a couple of different companies now, and I work from home now just by the nature of our charity. But my previous employer, I was in an office, and the only adaptation they had to make for me was a seat without wheels. That was it. Yeah. Before I got that job with them, I had some job rejections. I know everyone gets job rejections, but I am 99% sure that job wasn't offered to me because I had a physical disability, and that employer would have been like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to support them. In fact, before I got my first job after uni, and this is probably where the most huge assumption of me was made, which has probably stemmed my whole interest in this topic, is I went into a local job centre, job agency type place. I waited my turn at the front, and I said, "Oh, hiya, I'm just out of university, about to graduate. I'm looking for a job." At that point, I didn't know I wanted to go into the charity sector where I now work. I just knew I needed some money in the bank. This lady come to me, she told me to sit down, so I did. And she come back a couple of minutes later with a scrap bit of paper with an 0800 number on it. I asked her what the number was, and she said it was the number for DWP. She said, "You need to claim this if you want employment benefits." I said, I don't want benefits. I'd like a job. I'm just out of university. I've got a really good degree. I want to work. And she wasn't having it. She was saying, no, you need to just call this number. They'll sort you out. And I said, no, I want to work. She said, well, if you want to work, you need a fit note from your doctor. Obviously, I was in the place with my frame, again, visible disability. She said, no, you need to go to your doctor, get a fit to work note. Sorry, I said, I'm not ill. I'm not sick. I've just got a lifelong disability. She wasn't having it. So in the end, I just took the bit of paper, I put it in the bin on the way out, and I said, thank you, I'll find something elsewhere. But yeah, she just saw me in my frame, saw that I had a disability, and just assumed that I would never work. And again, a couple of days later, I went into another local job agency, filled in all the forms, went back over to them and said, what do you want me to do with these? They said, just leave them there. And I knew that they weren't going to do anything with them because they saw my frame. And I know for a fact they didn't, because I know people around the same time that got work through that agency, and I never heard back. So, yeah. But I've now had 8 amazing years in employment that I absolutely adore. So, it just shows that, yeah, assumptions aren't always true.
No, again, part of it, as you started that, I'm going, perhaps they were going, we don't know what we need to do, so it's best not to even. Whereas rather than, we don't want them.
Yeah.
It's a different thing, and the result is the same. But one is we don't know, so it's best not to. Or the other one is we do not want. And I'm hoping we've moved away from we do not want to I don't know what, because they're just, as you said, as we all know, there is just not that much awareness or information.
Mm-hmm.
You're not seeing it. You're not watching someone else with a walking frame come into your office, do a great job and leave, and going, that's unexpected. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We need, and that's saying, we need to get that awareness around more. We need to see more people with physical disabilities doing the jobs, doing the stuff.
Yeah.
And everyone going, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that. What other assumptions have you faced?
That I wouldn't have like a kind of partner or engage with anything that you do. I keep it very vague, but keep it you wouldn't engage in anything that you do when you have a partner. I've had people ask quite intrusive questions like that, and you kind of think, would you ask that to the next person? It's just a bit odd. I think another massive one for me that always sticks in my mind is, anyone that knows me knows I'm naturally a happy person. And I was, again, it always happens in supermarkets. I was walking into a Tesco's years ago with my stepdad, and my stepdad frequently makes me laugh. He said something funny. He wandered off one way to get what he needed. I went up the other way. And this old chap come up to me. I think he meant well. And he said, oh, it's lovely to see people like you laughing. And I just stopped, and I was like, I didn't say anything because it was a couple of days before Christmas and it was packed in the supermarket and I couldn't really stop. But I just kind of was like, what? I just remember walking around the supermarket just thinking, what? And I come out of the supermarket with nothing I needed because I was so distracted. I was like, what do you mean? People like me. I think people think that if you have a disability, you must be so sad and it's terrible. But actually, people with disabilities, just like people without, can lead the most fulfilling, happy, successful lives. And it doesn't have to equate to sadness at all.
And that's the thing. The other thing is, again, last leg again, you cannot make fun of disabilities. You cannot do this. Disability cannot be included in the humour. And they just come along and smashed that whole idea that and that's the thing, is you can have lots of fun. It's quite brave to do it on national TV.
They just get it right. I don't know what it is. They've just got a formula that's just spot on.
And I think if I'm going to insult you or make a joke about your disability, if you're not offended, and that's the sort of thing we can have private jokes, and that's great.
Yeah.
If someone's overhearing that and is offended on your behalf,
well,
then that's then saying to you, well, you're not able enough to have an opinion. And that's, I think, where people get, oh, we can't do this. So then they sit there going, oh, I don't really know how to do anything. And it's, again, that misunderstanding and misconception and basically treating you as a lesser person.
Yeah.
I can't have a joke with you because you have a walking frame.
Yeah, I think it just comes back to, again, like people almost overcomplicate it and think about it almost too deeply. And I think in terms of, making jokes and having fun, for me, it comes back to how I would treat anyone. You can have a joke with someone about, a characteristic of theirs, whether it be a disability or whether they're tall or short, whatever. It's okay if you're laughing with them, not at them.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And I think it's just about treating people with respect. And I think sometimes, some people will go too far, and those jokes will go too far, and they'll cross that very fine line. I think the important thing there is, if that does happen, and it does, we're all human, we make mistakes, just holding your hands up and admitting that you got it wrong and it went too far and just apologising. It just comes back just to being a respectful human being. Nothing else.
There's a TV show, American TV show around autism called Atypical. I don't know if you've seen it.
I've seen that, yeah.
And I really like that. And you can argue about the portrayal of autism, but what I love about it is the family dynamics around him.
Yes.
Like the mum going, I've been supporting him for 12 years and he doesn't need my support. Who am I?
Yeah.
And the dad. But I love the relationship between him and his sister. They just wind each other up. They hate each other. They do that. And then that moment he's struggling and she's needed, it stops and she's there.
Yeah.
And I really like that. It's like saying you can really rip apart each other because but when you need them, they're going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've watched that program, and I related to that with my own brothers as well. And I think it comes up to what we were saying as well look around how family members and friends of people with disabilities are interacting and treating them, because they'll tell you everything you need to know. Like, yeah, I might have a physical disability and my brothers don't, but we grew up together. We're very close in age. They had a bike for Christmas. I had a bike for Christmas. It might have looked slightly different, but I think life with disability isn't as different as everyone thinks. And yeah, I think programs like that are really good.
Have you
powerful.
seen I think it's a YouTube short of this woman going, I bought my brother a bike for Christmas. He thought he'd be a lot happier. And then it pans around to him in his wheelchair, holding his mountain bike.
Oh no!
And then then there's the next bit. He's on his mountain bike and just falls over.
Oh no!
I like that kind of that assumption, and then the truth. But then the whole, I like that side of comedy. But again, the people doing it are the people with the disabilities being involved, kind of drawing that attention.
I think a lot of disabled influencers have got into doing those kind of shorts and those like comedy sketches as a way of trying to overcome that awkwardness and that uncertainty, because maybe it's a British thing, but I think comedy is often the way around things, and a lot of them do it very well. But I think if you can make something a little bit lighthearted. But again, I think it's such a complex issue. I'm sure we could talk about it all day, but there's so many sides of it as well, because there's that humour side of it. Someone sees that, finds that funny, but then is in a real life situation and, like you say, isn't sure whether then they can then continue that or not. But I think it just comes down to just ask the person, go and speak to the person, ask them just like you would anyone else. Be polite, say your please and thank yous and excuses me, all that kind of stuff, and You'll be surprised.
But I bet you if I said to you, not on the podcast, shall we go for a bike ride? You'd probably give me an entertaining response.
Yeah. And I do, and I often make jokes quite often, like with my work team around things like that, and yeah.
But in reality, I shouldn't not ask.
No, because
'Cause-
I might have a bike and I might say yes.
Or you
know?
might go, well, we could do a tandem and you pedal.
Yeah, that's what I might say.
But it's like, I'm literally going, if I see, like, you have a walking frame. So basically, you're going to need to make sure you've got wild hours to get down.
Mm-hmm.
Stairs, challenging. And that's as much as I've made an assumption. Yeah. Whereas I think, as we've discussed, if I see that, that means you're intellectually disabled. You can't communicate. You need a carer with you 24/7. You cannot have a partner. Don't even think about getting into bed with anyone or anything else.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We take one thing and apply so many things to it, where we should just look at that and go, well, if you have that, you need this.
Yeah. And even when there are those kind of, needs that you might have, also recognizing that that individual has probably got ways around that as well.
Yeah.
And understanding that. I think another one for me, I often speak about when I do kind of the training and stuff, is I drive. I have an adapted vehicle, very basic adaptions, but I put my frame in the back of the car, in the back seats. It collapses. I've got a very unique way of doing it. I absolutely admit to the passerby, probably looks like I'm struggling. I can assure you I'm absolutely not. I've done that tens of hundreds of thousands of times. And actually, when I was learning to drive, that was a big thing that, like, my family and also my driving instructors worked with me on, is like, how are we going to do this? Because it's great if you can get that driving license, but actually if you can't get out and get to where you need to, what's the, we've only really done half the job there if you pull up at the shop and then can't get into the shop because you can't get your frame in and out on your own. But yeah, I've had so many people that I've put the frame down and I've gone to put it in my car and I've just like taken it away and decided to put it in the car for me. And I know it comes from a good place. They want to help, but actually that I'm fine. I can do it on my own. If I needed help when I was super stuck, I would ask for help.
Or if you're tired because you've had a long day, whatever, fine.
I would ask for help. And I always say as well, I said it once before to someone because they were I just couldn't shake them off in the nicest way. I said, I promise you, my parents wouldn't let me out if they knew I was going to struggle. But yeah, then it often can put you in more of a dangerous situation by them doing that. I've got my very specific way of doing it, so I know when I get to my destination that I'm, I can get it out okay. But yeah, it's just, if they just ask, I'll just say, oh, I'm okay, thank you. But yeah, really appreciate it though. Have a nice day kind of thing. But they still carry on.
But it's one of the things where you kind of, to be that nice person, it's like holding a door open. You're going to do a nice thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, but by me asking, I'm assuming you can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Me offering, you're immediately implying a 2-level thing.
Yeah, and for me, that's exactly it. I think you should always assume someone can until they, disclose otherwise or ask for help. Always assume someone can, and that's why I love the work that I do, that we spoke about earlier, and other charities that I'm involved with as well, because they all focus on what people can do, and for me, that's so important, because once you kind of flip to that way of thinking around what people can do rather than what they can't, your whole attitude to disability changes for the better.
Definitely. But it is, and generally, where you are on that journey, you might be, well, I don't know. And that's the thing, I know I've come on that journey. I've known for years that actually I have panicked in situations, I've overcompensated and things like that. And I know I've done that, and I've walked away going, I shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't. It sounds in your head when you first say, I shouldn't be offering to do this or that. But you can. I'm like, but I know, but I'm not giving them the opportunity. Why am I taking that away? But they might struggle. When we call it struggling, as you said, it looked like it, but that's their independence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, to someone else it looks like I'm struggling, but to me it's just completely normal. And if in a rare circumstance I am completely stuck, I will shout for help. For example, a couple of weeks ago, classic British summer we've had, pouring down with rain. It was the rain was just chucking it down. All my shopping bags had like disintegrated because of the rain. So I did ask someone for help because all my stuff was on the floor in the pouring rain. That's an example of if I need help, I will ask for it. Like, so I know people, and again, I say it very, very cautiously. I know it always comes from a good place, and I never want to come across ungrateful at all, anything like that. But if someone means that, they probably mean it, and they will have a way around it. As I said, like, disabled people are some of the best problem solvers that I know.
You're dealing with it for the first time. This is their 22nd, 25th,
Yeah.
28th, however many years I've been doing this.
Yeah.
I've got this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's acknowledging as well is that, like, within that kind of panic and uncertainty sometimes around disability is actually the largest minority group in the world that anyone can become part of at any time. So chances are for your life, you are going to have some experience of it, which is, in terms of kind of overcoming that panic and uncertainty, is helpful. But I think if you can have an acknowledgement of that can help as well.
And it's one you do get a taster of it if you ever break something or have I had a knee op.
Yeah.
I tasted it for a week.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of, you sit there and you get in your car and it's like, that's lots of effort. And you use crutches for 3 days and you get blisters on your hands and things. And you're like, and you sit there going, it helps you sit there and go, but you do things differently. You learn differently. That's me suddenly changing.
Yeah. You just adapt, don't you?
But it just helps you sit there and you just do look at things slightly differently. And it is not worse, not better, different.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that comes back to what I was saying around kind of assumptions that my life should be unhappy because I have a disability. It's no better or worse than the next person. It's just might look different to theirs. But to me, my life is my life, completely normal. And yeah, it should be treated that way by everyone else.
And so it shall be. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for this really quick impromptu podcast.
Yes, thank you.
We need to do more on physical disabilities. We do definitely need to do more. You've got a blog you've written, so you're going to send me a link to that.
Yes, it's a bit outdated now, but just touches on some of the things we spoke about as well.
But she's definitely not going to change the age. She's still that age.
I wish.
And I'll get some other contact and use your socials on there as well. And as always, you'll find the show notes wherever you listen to the podcast or on the Sendcast website. Thank you for listening to the show. If you haven't subscribed already, click on that subscribe button. You can also sign up to our newsletter on the Sendcast website and be told about the latest episodes. You can follow us on various socials. So on Twitter, still not X, at the Sendcast, on Facebook, the Sendcast, Instagram, the Sendcast, and TikTok, Sendcast. And if you're looking for a simple, secure way to capture and share evidence of learning, or a way to capture pupil voice, a way to celebrate and share achievements, or a simple, safe way to communicate with parents, you need to have a look at Eversense. Eversense is our evidence system and our parental communication system. It really helps to boost parental engagement. To find out more about Eversense, visit the B-Square website. You can also find out about our online training, read our blog, watch our webinars, and so much more. And you'll find a link to the website and to book a meeting with me in the show notes. Really good. And I can take you through what Eversense can do, and I can answer any questions you have as well. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Sendcast. It is goodbye from me.
Bye from me.
Bye, everyone.